Okay, hello, this is just a quick video that explains the code behind this graphics and image processing assignment because there's a lot of code. There's over 700 lines of it in total, so I thought I'd make a quick explanation video. I'm not gonna go too much into detail, it's just supposed to give a rough idea of what the code is structured like and how it works internally. So I have three tables, three HTML tables. This is one big form, and each of these elements groups is a table. And then each row here is a row in a table. So the first table is the add UI, which is the UI of adding new bars to the chart. So I manage that in these add UI.js file. So I took a certain approach to pretty much all of these files here that they're very similar in structure. I used global variables to describe the state of the UI. So it'd be, say, the color, or whether this is enabled, or the position here. And I update them through the on-click and on-change events that they have assigned here. So for example, this color picker bar, what it does, it defines these three values, which is the object value, which is the color picker object, the value of the color picker itself, and then whether it's enabled. So that would be this checkbox here. So that's just a boolean here. And what I do, I initialize them on load. So this body tag here, it has an onload call, which is located in this onload.js, and basically it initializes a bunch of stuff, a bunch of states, which is, one of them is add UI, and we can see initialize bar color picker. So that's right there. And we initialize it in here. And what we're doing is just getting the object. We're getting the value of the object separately, and then assigning some default value. So in this case, we don't want this, we want this just to be false, because we want it to be empty on load. It'd still be empty on load without this, but I just added here just for the sake of clarity. There is an update function, so this is on enable change. So that's on the checkbox that I have here. If that checkbox is changed by the user, it fires this update bar color picker enabled function, and it passes in its value. So this is just a boolean, false, true, and then here's the function, and it will reverse the boolean and set the object to hidden. So if the checkbox is true, it will set hidden to false, and the enable value to true, and reverse for if the checkbox is false, it will set hidden to true and enable to false. And then I have another function for updating the value. So this is on user input on this color picker. So if I change the color here, that fires the on change function here, or event. That's defined here. It just grabs the value that's passed in and assigns it to the value. And this is I take the same approach for pretty much everything in this assignment. So there's editor.js, it uses the same approach. So the text color picker works exactly the same as the bar color picker. And then added position is identical with one exception. So it's still same initialization value enabled. There is the position restrict. So what I do here is I call it in update value. So when this value is updated, it will update. When this value is updated, it will update the state, and we'll also call this position restrict. Basically, what it does, it says if the added position value is less than 1, so we try to go less than 1, it's just setting to 1. And then if it's more than the length of the array plus 1, because there is a position here as well that we can add to, just set it to that position. So 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we can go higher than. If we try, we'll just go, no, we'll just set it to 6. So that's the add UI. The next table here is the line chart. So the line chart I have in options UI.js. So it takes the same approach. It initializes it, and then it has its update function. It will redraw when set to enabled. And then in the draw.js, we're accessing that global enabled variable, which is line chart enabled. And we're using line chart if it's enabled, we're using bar chart if it's false. The only thing worth of mention here is maybe the colors. So if we switch to line chart, you can see the colors are going backwards. So we're not going red, blue, red, blue, red. We're going backwards. So we're going red, blue, red, blue. So we're taking we're ignoring this first color because we can have a line with only one value. So if we remove everything but this 900, we'll just have 900. It's red, but we can't do anything with it. And then if we add another value that's blue, well, we have to decide on the color, so we're just taking the blue. We're basically ignoring completely the color of the first value, which is done here. So if only one value, or on the first value, just don't do anything. So basically it only will draw text on the first value and nothing happens, because you can't have a line chart with only one value. So that's the only thing worth of note here. The next thing being, I'll skip editor for now and I'll move on to dynamic scaling here, dynamic scale calculation. So the problem I had initially with the original code is the way scale behaves. So if I go 1, we have ones. If I go to say 10, we have a step of tens. If I go to 100, we have a step of 100. If I go to 1000, we have a step of 1000, which is not the best idea because we're wasting so much space. So we don't need that big of a step. So the approach I took here is I grabbed the highest value and I divide it by the number of lines, which is 7. And I get this perfect spacing value. So if I use this perfect spacing as line spacing, this value will precisely hit this line. So the top line here will be equal to 3200. But this will result in uneven scale. So the scale will have weird values. It will go every 457. 457, 457 will be a very weird scale. So I thought the best thing to do here is to round it up to 500. So we want to round it up to the next value in the decimal range. So we calculate the decimal range to be hundreds because we are in hundreds. And we want to round it up to the next 100. So in this case, 500. So we take the first digit here. We add 1 to it, so that gives us 5, and then just simply multiply it by the decimal range, and we use this as our line spacing, which is 500. So if I go to say 3700, instead of having our scale go in thousands, our scale will be in 600s, so that it facilitates this 3700. That should have been blue. I had the color picker, there we go. One issue being here is that if this value is exactly 4200, what will happen is this will be equal to say 600, and we will take the 6 and we'll round it up, and there is no need because 600 is already what we want. We want the round value in a decimal range of hundreds. So 600 is a round value in decimal range of 600s. So what I did was, I'll show it. We're calculating this to be 600, which is fine. We still do the operation of calculating decimal range and everything, but we're saying, and there's an if for that, we're saying if the perfect spacing, so that will be this, that'll be this 600 here, is equal to our calculated value without rounding up. So without this one here, this console log is wrong. It's equal to our calculated value without rounding up. Just use perfect spacing, which is 600, and then otherwise round it out by 1 or increase this by 1. So 600 here, for example, to 6, and multiply by decimal range 100, and that gives us 600 here. And that's the logic of these operations here. So line spacing, the highest value, perfect spacing dividing by 7, calculating the decimal range. So we start with 1 and multiply by 10 until we go above perfect spacing. So say we're doing it for 457 here. We start 1, then 10, then 100. 100 is still less than perfect spacing. 1000 is more than we grab the previous value, which is 100, and we end up with 100 as decimal range. This is just converting to a string. So this is for extracting the first number, convert it to a string, and then grab the first value in the array of the string array and convert it back to an integer. This is the exception, if else, and just returning the values here. The editor, so moving on to the editor, it follows exactly the same approach as the UI. So we're initializing values, and then we define update value, and there's even restrict. The major changes being this update position value here. So what it does is on change, let me bring this up here and this up here. On change of this value, we want to update the state of this UI. So we're saying, okay, update the state of the bar color picker UI. So if you move to the right, the state is being updated. So we're calling these view updates here, and then we draw the chart because we want to update our selection here. There's a restrict, so we the same as at position, so we can't go higher than the last value. So this is 8 because the last position is 8, and the position here is 7, and then 1 for the first value. Position move left, right, so that's just for the buttons, the events for the buttons, so left, right, and then this will also fire the position on change. So it'll force this object to have its on change fired so that this gets run. Just simpler way of running this. Right. And it's done like this so that it grabs its own value. So I don't have to pass in the value here. I don't have to reference the object, and then it's just simpler. So this is moving left and right. So I can move left and right. Basically just get the position we're at right now. So 5, get the values we're at right now. So red, 3, 200, and text is void. Save them, remove from the array, insert it to the left with the values that we've saved, and then fire the onChange event for the position because we want to keep track of it. So if I move this to the right, it's now in position 6, so I want it in position 6. So I can select one object and I can just move it around. Otherwise, if I move this to the right, I'll be still stuck at this object now. So the position changes dynamically as well. And this was here. Here, there we go. So move right, the same as left. This initialization here. So these values have their defaults specified in the HTML. So the editor value input has a default of 0, but I want this on load to be equal to whatever value is first. So what I do is, if the array is empty, use the default that's in the HTML, the object, HTML object.value, And then if the array is not empty, use whatever is in the array. And that's the case for all of three of these elements. They're being initialized with the values from the array. Unless the array is empty, then they'll be initialized with their defaults, which is 0, red, and white, which is exactly what we have here. But if I change the value here to say, if I change this to white and reload F5, it's being initialized with white, so that works. So the main difference being here that I have two events for kind of accessing the values. The first one is when the user changes the value. So if I change the value to 9,000, that's me. So I'm updating the value itself. And then the view value. So if I select to the right, I want the view value to be updated here of the UI. So that's this function that updates the view state of the UI element. Exactly the same approach for the bar color picker. And then for the text color picker, it's still exactly the same approach as before. So these three elements have exactly the same structure. And then the remove button, which is just removing from the array. Thing of note, if we remove last element, the position will shift to the left. So we're shifted to the 4. And that's because we run the restrict position again on remove. So after remove an element, so after we remove element 5, we remove it, restrict position sees 5 here and sees that it's too high because there's only 4 elements, and it restricts it back to 4. And we redraw everything. That's everything there is to this code. And yeah, that's it.